Now, you know him as our coupon king, but this morning our very own Jordon Cox is opening up about a health battle he's faced for so many years.
Yeah, after experiencing severe stomach cramps as a teen, Jordon was eventually diagnosed with Crohn's disease at just 17 years old. At its worst, Jordon was left hospitalised, experiencing crippling pain and unable to walk.
He joins us now alongside Dr. Zoe. Welcome to both of you. Jordon, I mean, firstly, we had absolutely no idea.
That's the thing. Invisible illnesses like this, you can look at someone and have absolutely no idea.
Yeah.
Secondly, do you look at that picture and think it was like a lifetime ago, or is that like a heartbeat for you?
Yeah, I still get a little bit choked up looking at that. Just because, like, when you're in it, you don't realise how bad you are.
Yeah.
Like, you're just like, OK, it's fine, you know, I'll get on with it, you know, I'll get better. But everyone else around you, your loved ones, your family members, they just sort of see you get worse and worse.
Yeah.
And there's not much really they can do to help.
OK, so take us back, Jordon, to when you first saw some signs with regards to feeling unwell.
So throughout my sort of, like, teenage years, I always had sort of, like, stomach cramps and things, which were always just sort of put off as, you know, like, growing pains. Like, we didn't really think too much of it. And then when I was 17, I got quite a bad bout of food poisoning. And from that, after it all cleared up, I just never got better. Like, that
As in the pains kept carried on?
Yeah, the pains kept carrying on. I still felt fatigued. I could barely really walk around very much without being, like, severely out of breath at 17 years old. And we were like, well, that's not right. So I went to the GP, sort of, like, explained everything. This was maybe, like, 3-4 weeks afterwards. And we were like, you know, this isn't right. I'm still not feeling well in myself. I'm getting a lot of pains. And for a long time, it was so hard to diagnose. So first of all, they said that there was nothing wrong with me. And I was like, well, there is.
Clearly there is.
Yeah, absolutely there is. Then I was misdiagnosed with bulimia. One of the doctors was like, oh, I think you're bulimic. And I was like, no, no, that's not it
You
either.
wanted to eat?
Yeah, of course I wanted to eat. But every time I ate, I'd just be in severe abdominal pain.
Just to bring Zoe in slightly, is that quite common? Like, is it easier to diagnose this now as opposed to back then where it would have been like slightly harder?
It is.
We
have a new test. Well, it's not new, but it's relatively new since Jordon would have been seen as GP. It's called a fecal calprotectin. It's a stool test, so it's really easy to do. We would do a blood test as a GP alongside that. It's 90% accurate at showing if there's inflammation in the gut.
But at the time, would that have been quite common for that to be misdiagnosed?
I would have expected that if it was now, Jordon would have been offered that test, that would have sped things up. But I think back then there wasn't a very good test other than putting a camera down and up, which is still the diagnostic test.
Sure.
Yeah.
So eventually, Jordon, you did get that diagnosis, and this is after being really persistent with your GP, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So it was a colonoscopy that we basically fought for, which is a weird thing to fight for. But after that, we sort of got the diagnosis. And from that point, I was just relieved, to be honest.
And what was that diagnosis? That you had Crohn's? Basically?
Yes, it was Crohn's disease, yeah.
And then off the back of that, do you know then how to live your life? Or is it like...
No. I mean, when you're diagnosed with any disease, it's quite a sort of lonely thing. Of, like, most of the time you don't really know what it is. You don't know anyone else with it. So you're sort of given this diagnosis, this bombshell, and then you're like, well, what now? Like, where do we go from here? But I was kind of relieved that I got that, because then in my mind I was like, now we can work towards
You could understand all that pain, all what was going on. It wasn't in my head. You know what's going on.
Yeah.
So 2018 happens and you're hospitalised. What's going on?
So I got to a point where my Crohn's was stabilised through pills, which I was having, which was fine. And then in 2018, things just got incredibly, incredibly worse. And it got to a point where my bowel just wasn't absorbing anything. So I had quite bad diarrhoea. I had quite a lot of blood in my stools. Every time I ate, nothing would be like all of the nutrients wouldn't be absorbed because my bowel just wasn't working. And throughout that time, I lost so much weight. And you can sort of see from the photos, I was down to 6 stone 10 in weight, which, I mean, I'm 6'5".
Yeah.
So I was basically...
Not a lot of weight to go around, is it?
Yeah, I was skin and bone at that point. And I was probably, I mean, I don't want to say it, but I was probably a few months away from my body just giving up completely.
So it got to the stage where you're actually being fed with IV tube, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, when I got admitted into hospital at that point, they were like, you need surgery, you need to have this bit of bowel removed that was really bad. But I was too thin. I didn't have enough, like, energy in my body.
You had to go and put on weight to have that surgery?
Yeah, you needed...
And how hard was that?
I mean, to hear that wasn't great.
Sure.
They were like, you need to have a bit more to you, otherwise you're not going to survive a pretty major surgery. So, yeah, they hooked me up to something called TPN, which is total parenteral nutrition, which it went through a sort of wire in my arm or my neck where 24 hours a day, I was just being fed through a bag.
Jordon.
I can't believe you've been through all this.
I know.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. When we see you here,
Yeah.
like, it is an invisible illness.
So much energy and so fit and vibrant.
And also with Crohn's, you never get rid of it, do you? You live with it. Is that right, Dr. Zoe?
Yeah, yes, it's not curable. It's a chronic inflammatory condition of the gastrointestinal tract. So that's anywhere from the mouth all the way through the body to the anus, although it most commonly affects, as it did with Jordon, the final bit of the small intestine. But it's not curable. There are lots of medications and drugs, and they get better and better decade and decade, but there is no cure. And it tends to have this, what we call relapsing remitting. So you might be really well for a period of time, and then it flares up again, and then you might be well.
Is that to do with what you're eating at that time, or is that completely arbitrary?
It can be, yeah. So we know that, you know, there's a genetic component to it. So if somebody close to you and your family has it, you're more likely, but there are environmental risk factors as well. So not everybody with a genetic component gets it. Smoking increases the risk of it. Having a unhealthy balance of gut microbes. But interestingly, getting food poisoning, that can trigger it, or it can really exacerbate it, and stress can as well, and certain foods can.
And this story just gets worse and worse. So you're having this feeding tube. You then have to feed yourself. You go home, you start feeding yourself with this feeding tube. You've got to put on weight in order to have surgery. But then you suddenly get sepsis, so some infection with regards to the feeding. Yeah. And you have to go back into hospital. But in a way, it's kind of a good thing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the feeding tube, I was in hospital for about 90 days where they were administering it, the nurses in the hospital.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where they were like, well, you can actually teach yourself to do it at home. So you can live a more sort of normal life, sort of have it at home, sort of hook yourself up to it every night and just sort of have the bag feed you overnight. I was nil by mouth at this point as well, so I wasn't eating any solid food. It was all through this.
No drinking?
I could have little drinks, yeah. So it got to a point where I could have, like, cups of tea, which was, like, the best thing in the world. But, yeah, I sort of went home to just sort of feed myself through the tubes. And you have to be so careful with these tubes because it's a direct line into your veins. So you're being fed through directly into your sort of system.
It needs to be clean.
It needs to be so clean. And there was a mess-up on my part, probably, with me administering it.
But, Jordon, you said in the notes, what was really interesting, I think it struck me most reading about it last night, you said this was almost, I mean, it's crazy to say getting sepsis is a blessing in disguise, but then that enabled you to get the treatment, the surgery you really needed, right?
Yeah, because I went into hospital for that, they were like, well, while you were here, you've gained a bit of weight, you're sort of ready for surgery now. They just got it done, which it was a blessing in disguise. And I had an ileostomy. So it's a little bag on your stomach where sort of a bit of bowel comes out and all the waste goes into that bag. So they cut out, I think it was 30 centimetres of diseased bowel, which sounds like a lot. You've got a lot of bowel in there.
Right.
I don't know how big it is, but it's
a few metres.
Yeah, a few metres long. So, but it was still a big portion. And I had the bag to basically give my bowel a rest and just sort of let it settle down after everything it went through.
So how did your life change once you had that surgery?
I tell you what, it was one of the best things that I could have done. It gave me my life back. At that point, when I was at my worst, I could barely walk from, like, my bedroom to the bathroom.
Wow.
Like, walking from here over to that table.
You're out of breath?
I'd be out of breath. It felt like I'd run a marathon.
Really?
Yeah, and I was 20 years old at the time. That's no way for a 20-year-old to live, really.
No.
But after I had that surgery, just everything was back to normal, other than, obviously, a bag. But
And what's happened since then, Jordon? Because so it's been, I mean, excuse my ignorance, but it's been reversed, or how does it?
Yeah, so the bag, if you've got Crohn's, there is a possibility of it being reversed. So after a year, my sort of bowel settled down, all the disease was removed, so they managed to sort of reconnect my bowel together, so it's just a normal functioning system. And since then, I've just been, well, living a more normal life. Yeah. But life with the bag was totally fine as well. Like, it gave me my life back.
Yeah. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Are some people more prone to getting Crohn's?
So there is this genetic component. Yeah, even if you have that, you won't always get Crohn's. Right. Similar with a lot of these autoimmune conditions. So this is a condition where it's the body's immune system that's actually causing the inflammation in the bowel wall. But for people who have it, like Jordon's now, completely off all medication, like living a normal life, the Jordon that we know and love. So, you know, not everybody is as lucky as that it's in remission, but I know you always live with there's always a chance that it could come back, so you have to remain healthy.
Zoe, just for people that are watching, so if you're, you know, what advice would you give in terms of diagnosis and if you're people are feeling dicky?
The symptoms, the commonest symptoms, are things going on with the tummy, particularly tummy aches and pains and spasms and cramps. Changes to your toilet habit, so, you know, going to the poo, predominantly it tends to be diarrhoea. There can be blood, there can be constipation as well sometimes. But then often these systemic symptoms of fatigue, low in energy, losing weight because you're not getting nutrients. If you've got those symptoms and you think it could be Crohn's disease, please go and see your GP. Ask for a blood test, including something called a CRP, which checks for inflammation, and also for something called a fecal calprotectin, tiny bit of your poo, and from that we can really get a good idea as to whether you're at risk of this condition and know if we need to refer you on for more tests.
Thank you, Dr. Zoe. And can I just say, Jordon, thank you for raising this awareness.
Yeah, brilliant.
Unbelievable.
It's a really important thing to talk about, and a lot of it is the mental side as well, because when you're diagnosed with the disease, you don't really know what's going on, and sort of getting over the mental barrier behind everything you're going through as well is such a tough thing. But I always saw it as every treatment I had, every sort of drug I was on, every surgery was just sort of like a vehicle to get me to being better, and that just really helped me. And yeah, hopefully it helps other people as well.
Thank you so much for visiting our This Morning YouTube channel. We upload new content every single day, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the morning.